And good Saturday morning. Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. It's the Saturday live stream where we are saving Disney history courtesy of, well, I'm going to call him Professor Ed McCray because that's exactly what he is. He's the professor of all Disney knowledge, the keeper of all Disney knowledge, and
I
what he
like
has
that.
been doing since late December. We've been doing this. This is episode 9 out of a 12-part series. Really, it's 24 hours with Ed. I spend a couple hours each Saturday morning where Ed goes through the history of Walt and Walt Disney World, where the company has been, what it was founded on, the principles that it was founded on, where things started to go off the rails, and where it is today. And today, I believe, is animated characters.
Yes.
Is that right, Ed?
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
right.
topic of today's
The
program.
animated characters from the shorts, because a lot of the shorts are banned now, so you don't know why. You might know who Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy are, but you don't know why they were famous in the first place. They're just corporate symbols now.
Okay, very good. All right, so let me get your folders open here on this end, and boom. Let's see. All right, I'm 1 for 1 today.
Oh,
Good start.
yeah.
Okay.
We have all these photos of Walt with the different characters. I'll set it up here because I grew up in the 1980s, and that's when all this stuff was on cable. No one worried about political correctness or wokeness or anything. You had the Looney Tunes, Popeye, Tom and Jerry cartoons, and they also had the Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 60s and 70s. Those were all on cable all the time. So I grew up with all this stuff. I didn't realize how important it was at the time because a lot of people don't remember this stuff now, or they weren't alive to experience it. But why this is important with the Disney characters, because a lot of people think cartoons are for kids. It's because these characters were the original cartoons. They were made for adults, and they were enjoyed by all ages. And that was true with the comic strips and everything. And there's going to be overlap with comic strips today. But the Disney cartoons were unique because they were a staple in American culture. They reflected American culture, and they were ambassadors for American culture throughout the world, especially at the end of World War II. That a lot of the Disney ducks really are popular to this day in Europe, but that all came out of World War II, post-war. They were all about how great America was. You know, we just liberated them from Hitler and everything. And the Disney ducks were adopted into Europe. But before that, Mickey Mouse was a popular character, and he went on adventures and things. But Walt's studio was the only studio that had a story department as well. That's the other thing to point out. And the Looney Tunes didn't come along till the 70s, or the 40s, but they didn't have a mythology. They weren't adopted characters overseas and all that.
And who's Walt there with in this picture right here?
That's Works. They created Mickey Mouse together.
Right. Okay. Cool.
And we mentioned him. Yeah. Well, that's okay. We mentioned him in an earlier show. If anyone was interested in what his background was, he was in the Disney Legends show, and we've touched on him here and there because he was a very important figure. They were all partners. Walt, Roy, and Ub at the beginning. Ub had a 20% stake in the studio and everything when they first started. But I put all these in here. These are all that's from Bambi.
I see. Look, he's got the little deer taxidermy going on there.
Yeah, and they also had a live deer at the studio that they would draw from.
Oh wow, cool is this? I love this stuff, man. Wow.
I'm not.
So you want me to just scroll through here?
Just go through there,
things, man. Yeah.
And
nice color.
That's when he was doing Snow White. He was doing a pitch reel for that to tell people about the dwarves.
Okay.
I have one there from Pinocchio too. I'd never seen before. I'm learning new things and things I've forgotten. I probably have forgotten more about Disney and Walt Disney than most people know.
Yeah, I know. That's a fact, dude.
And that one, they bring this photo up all the time, but it was for Walt's first Christmas special. You can see the tree in the background. No one notices the tree most of the time. The first Christmas special was to advertise Alice in Wonderland coming out.
I like it. Okay.
That was a little later in life. We was doing Mickey, Donald, and Goofy there. One of our links is going to be a link where he talks about some of the characters to the BBC.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Don't forget, everybody, when these shows are done, shortly after, down in the description here on the YouTube channel are just so many supporting links from Ed that really shows this stuff. if you want to do deep dives or go back and look at something or see something that he references here, chances are there's a link to it here in the description just below.
Yeah, today we'll have some samplings of the different characters, so you get an idea what their shorts were like. Because most people today, they know the animated features, but they don't know the animated shorts. And there, 6 of the characters have stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Mickey, Donald, Minnie Mouse, Tinkerbell, Snow White, and Winnie the Pooh.
Mickey, Donald, Minnie, Snow White,
Winnie the Pooh, and
Tinkerbell, Winnie the Pooh. Man, 6. That's a great trivia question.
Well, I had it as 5, but I found out Minnie got one a few years ago. They probably Me Too'd her or something ridiculous.
Oh, no. Well, no, Minnie, come on now. Minnie deserves a spot.
Well, when we're done with this one, when you watch Mickey's Christmas Carol this coming Christmas, you'll recognize a lot of the characters who cameo in that in the background, because a lot of those characters are actually characters from the shorts or the comic books, and we don't know them here in America anymore.
All right, should I go to other studios?
Yeah, because this will show what other studios were doing, so you can understand where Mickey came from and where Walt started. You can see all these characters look very similar. That was Felix the Cat, and he was put out by the same distributor who did the Alice comedies and Oswald, and she was a woman. It was Margaret Winkler, and we're always told that everybody was sexist back then and women couldn't get ahead or anything like that. But he was the most popular character at the time, and it was a woman who was the distributor. I thought that one was a great one for you there. He's scrubbing a baby in the bathtub. See, cartoonists would come up with stuff like that, and they didn't worry about people imitating it or being offended or anything. They just were weird, off-the-wall ideas because they're cartoons. They're not supposed to be documentaries.
1922.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'm not sure when he started. I have a book on Felix. Felix started in comics, but look there's the fan mail. He was just as popular as you remember the photo we had with Walt and Mickey's fan mail. It was really Felix the Cat that was the first popular character like that.
Wow, man. Good stuff.
That's Cubby the Bear. He was for a studio no one remembers called Van Buren, but you see how they're very similar to how Mickey was.
Those eyes, man.
Mickey came later. That was the style back then. This was the first Looney Tune character. This was after Mickey, but that's Bosco, the talking kid. And you don't see Bosco anymore because they say it's a person in blackface.
Wait a minute. Oh,
well, that was him there too. Well, that's
no, that's what I was going to go back and look at that. Okay.
The revisionist historians say that these characters are blackface, but they're designed that way because the films were in black and white. How could you see the facial features unless they're white?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is Cubby.
Yeah,
the bear.
Well, Cubby, that's one there is
who's this one?
That's still Bosco, but he became Buddy.
Oh, Bosco. But okay, Bosco.
If you remember Tiny Toon Adventures, they did an episode with Buddy, but they used Bosco as the design, and it was Bosco and Honey disappeared, and this one's Foxy. He came out after Mickey, and Harmon and Ising, they worked for Walt on the Oswalds. They're 2 of the guys that left.
This literally, it looks like Mickey.
Oh, I have the examples. I have the examples here of, and then we had Flip before, but that was Flip the Frog.
So Flip, you're right, man. I mean, these characters are all the same. They're just different animals drawn the same.
But that's what they did. In one of my forthcoming projects, I have an animation studio, and I did a beaver like that. And one of the Disney guys, they went and designed him to look like that. I mean, that's just generic animal characters. But you can see how everything kind of looked alike. Now, Crazy Cat was a popular comic strip, and this is what he looked like in animation. But then I have that one's Felix there. That's not a good. It's not a This is what it was about: the mouse and the cat, and the mouse would throw bricks at the head of the cat because the mouse loved, but the mouse was in love with the cat.
Wow!
This comic was very popular. It went till the 1940s. Walt loved this cartoon, this comic. He was always writing about Ignatz the Mouse and Crazy Cat, and there's how Mickey looked, so you can see it was very much in that style. That's like our little prologue to set everything up.
Set everything up. Okay, so
and the
Julius
next one,
the cat.
Yep, Julius the cat. This was Walt's first character. Okay. And he's still around if you know where to look. Some of the theme parks have Julius the cat, but he was the precursor to Oswald and Mickey. But that was the first main character. But first, he started with Laugh-O-Grams in Kansas City, and that was where his studio was. And that's him with Ub Iwerks. I'm not sure who the guy on the far left is. But Ub was there at the beginning, and they both grew up in Kansas City. That's Walt. Roy's there in the front there, and that's with all the animators that worked for him at the time in Kansas City.
Oops. What was that? Okay.
That's Walt at the drawing board. Mm-hmm. That's what his letterhead looked like. These are from the Laugh-O-Grams. This was his first series. One of our links has the surviving Laugh-O-Grams. They were fairy tales. And that was Julius. He first appeared in the Laugh-O-Grams, I think, 1922. 1922.
So, I'm just going to throw this out there, and I don't know for a fact, and you may not either. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. But it feels like until this era right here, it feels like cartoons or artists and stuff like that. That was really political cartoons only, right? Like, well, nobody really did this kind of stuff just for fun.
They came out of political cartoons and vaudeville. The first major star of that was Winsor McCay. He's an ancestor of mine, like a distant cousin. That's Margaret Winkler there, the producer or the distributor. And Winsor McCay would do vaudeville. He made a film where he interacted with Gertie the dinosaur, and he would interact with this dinosaur in vaudeville, and it was like a live presentation where he interacted with a cartoon on a screen. But that one there,
I love that headline.
Well, that's what I
read that headline, y'all. It says distributor as a woman proves surprise.
Well, I thought that was a great headline. We get told all this stuff today about women were suppressed back then, but they weren't. And that's with the first star, Alice there. That they did the Alice comedies. Uh-huh. Virginia Davis was the first Alice. There were 3 altogether. He did 55 Alice shorts, and Julius was her cat in there. And he was in most of them.
Big thanks to Big Tech, who's always looking out for us. Hit that like button. Thank you so much, Big Tech. You're awesome.
One of the and see there's one of the ads there. She was distributing Crazy Cat as well as Felix and Alice. And one of the things that the first Mickeys and Oswalds, what they did was he would take, like, Oswald would take his rabbit foot off and kiss it for good luck. Mickey, we have a photo we're going to come to eventually. He takes his ears off like a hat. And what would happen with Julius is his tail would be like a question mark or do different things.
Oh, that's smart.
And I guess that's an executioner, but he looks like a Klansman.
No kidding. Good grief.
And there were Klansmen in some of these old cartoons by other studios. They would you think the Klan got reconstituted under Woodrow Wilson, so that this was new with the 1920s.
Yes, sir.
Now that is Charles Mintz, and that's the biggest picture I could find of him. And he's the one who he stole Oswald from Walt, and the distributor owned the character. And one of the stories I found this week, I knew it, but I had forgotten it. Walt went to Universal Studios at a later date with Mickey to see about them distributing Mickey, and Charles Mintz was there, and they didn't talk about how he screwed him, but Mintz got screwed himself because Universal stole Oswald from Mintz, and but Walt still treated him like a normal person, didn't hold a grudge. Mm-hmm. And in Up, the villain is called, I think it's Charles Muntz, and I wonder if he's named after Charles Mintz. Now, this character became Black Pete, who was the character that Mickey Mouse was his villain. And he started out as a bear in Alice. Now there he is in Oswald. He's more like a wolf, but that's where Peg Leg Pete came from. He's got the peg leg. You just can't see too well. But he doesn't have a peg leg in the Steamboat Willie cartoon.
Yeah, that's right.
But sometimes he has it and sometimes he doesn't because the animators would forget which leg it was supposed to be.
I see that. Yeah, I see it on the left there and on the right over there.
Yeah.
That is hysterical.
But this whole thing shows a progression of how the characters they evolved over time. And I go all the way up to Goof Troop because he came into Goof Troop. And the Disney Afternoon was really the successor of the animated shorts. And but a lot of the people were still around. They were elderly. They were advising and everything on how they did things with the original characters. Is they kept using Pete. They softened his character and they made him more like a. And there's a Donald Duck cartoon where he's Donald's jerk neighbor, and I think that kind of inspired where he is today, where he was Goofy's neighbor in Goof Troop. And I know they still use these characters the 2000s, but I'm not really as familiar with the 2000s. I just don't care about all the wokeness and all that.
Sure.
He was in the Mickey Mouse comics as well.
I like how it says down at the bottom, comparable size to Mickey. Mickey is slightly more than half Pete's height.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to have your villain threatening to your hero. Mickey became more Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn-like as they went along. He starts out as being like a mouse in a farm, and then he becomes more like a little mischievous boy. That's when they made him a neighbor for Donald. You can see that's where he kind of is today, where he was in Goof Troop. In the Goofy movie, that was after Goof Troop. He was borrowing all the food in Donald's refrigerator. I remember that cartoon. They end up building a fence between them. There he is in Goof Troop. And that character became his son in Goof Troop. That's Pete Jr., and he was in a cartoon with Donald in 1942. Donald was the bellhop, Pete, and there's a Goofy cartoon. And that character was supposed to be Pete. And that became PJ. But even then, they still respected the past. It inspired where the characters went in the future. This was Pete's original girlfriend. It's Trudy Van Tub. But what they did with her, they did Goof Troop. He got a different wife, and it was Peg. And that was the daughter they had on Goof Troop. That was PJ. Her voice was the same as Bart Simpson, but I just put all that in. I don't do that with all the characters, but that's an example how that's the oldest character that's still in use today and how it evolved through time. Because all the characters kind of evolved through time, through different mediums. Even characters that aren't Disney, like Superman, all of the background you think of for Superman, they didn't do Smallville and everything in the beginning. Originally, he came to Earth in the rocket. He grew up in the rocket. And he didn't fly. He jumped over buildings. And when they did the cartoons, they thought it looked silly to have him jumping, so they had him fly. And now it took about 10 years to do Superman. A lot of these characters, they take time to evolve to who we know. And that's Oswald, and he came along in 1927, and he's now owned by Disney again. He's considered Mickey's half brother. Right.
That was the Al Michaels trade.
Yeah.
Right, between ABC and NBC.
But that's why I included him, because now he's considered part of the Disney family. He really always was, since Walt Nubb created him. But he's really the ancestor of Mickey. And a lot of the animators that worked on Mickey had said that Oswald never could have become as popular as Mickey because Oswald was kind of a strange character. But I think they learned a lot from Oswald to what not to do with Mickey and what to do with Mickey. A lot of the Oswald films have been found. There's a couple that are still lost because nobody kept these films. When they made all these cartoons, they were only supposed to last for a few years, and they were supposed to destroy the prints. And that was for all the studios.
Why is that?
Well, like with Popeye, that character started in comics, and they made a deal with King Features that they had to destroy all the films after a couple of years after the series was done. They weren't considered. They were thought of like a newspaper. You'd look at them once and throw them away, and they became evergreens because of television. And they redid with Popeye, they redid the contracts so they wouldn't destroy them, so they have them for television. That's Oswald's girlfriend. She's Hortensia the cat.
Let's see. I see.
He had a bunny girlfriend before that, but they made her into her sister.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's the sister there. Right, that was when she was the girlfriend. The cat is a jazz singing cat. That's what I found on her. But you can see how she was the template for Minnie.
For sure.
And that's one of the pins, but that was a good picture of both of them together because now everything's in pins. That's a modern image of them. But it's like what I had said in previous shows, how everything Walt did was always built on things from the past. And even those, Mickey was built on Oswald and the Alice comedies. Okay. And now you understand the world, what the animation was like, where this all come about in the beginning, because people don't think about things like that. There's even more from the silent era you could go into, just all the different characters. And that's supposed to be the first drawings of Mickey.
Really?
Yeah, that still exists. They kept it in a safe, and I guess it's at the Walt Disney Family Museum. But those were the first sketches they made when Ub was figuring out what Mickey was going to be. And because if no one remembers the story, when Oswald got stolen, it was in New York City. When Walt met the distributor on the way home, he came up with the idea to do a mouse named Mickey. He was going to name the mouse Oswald. His wife hated the name, said couldn't name him Mickey. And he came back, told Ub, they collaborated on it, and all the artists got hired away from Walt. So Ub animated these cartoons by himself in the back room. And most animators could only do 80 to 100 drawings a day, and Ub was doing over 700 a day. Just to
say that again.
He did over 7. He's the Nikola Tesla of animation. He did over 700 drawings a day. Most of these first few shorts, Plain Crazy, the Galloping Gaucho, and Steamboat Willie, he animated most of them all by himself in a back room.
Good night.
Everything he did in life, Byworks, he would, when he would do sports, once he had a perfect game, he quit playing that sport because there was no reason to do it because he'd mastered it. And that was everything he did was like that. He really is the Nikola Tesla of animation and film, because he did special effects. Now, that person is Pat Powers, and he tried to steal Mickey away from Walt. He was the sound. Yeah, he was the sound guy, and he was the one who had the system that they used to record the sound. And he distributed the Mickeys. He tried to steal Mickey, but what he did was he stole Ub Iwerks away. And Ub didn't know he signed a contract with Pat Powers. Pat Powers had a surrogate sign a contract with Ub. And because of even today when they dub music with cartoons, that's where he tipped his hat. That inspired the Mickey Mouse Club hat. That cartoon, that was an Ub Iwerks thing where they would take body parts off and do things like that. when they dub music to animation or film now, it's called Mickey Mousing because Mickey was the first cartoon that had sound.
So wait a minute now. That's interesting because my grandfather, Papa, he would refer to his answering machine as the Mickey Mouse.
I wonder if that was because it recorded the sound.
That is interesting. We just thought it was a Papa-ism.
Well, John Williams, who does all those film scores for Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, he even calls film scoring Mickey Mousing. That's from the short we're linking to where Mickey breaks out of prison.
Okay.
And it's the cartoon.
He breaks out of prison with a smile on his face.
Yeah, he's there singing, and the guards beat him up because he's singing in the prison. And that was the cartoon where Pluto debuts. That's from the band concert. That was the first color Mickey cartoon. You can see how all the characters are still looking that way. And that Walt always teamed Mickey, Donald, and Goofy together after he had the three of them established. But we're going to get into all their backgrounds and everything. And one of the things we link to is Mickey's theme song was called Minnie's Yoo-Hoo, and that's not politically correct now because Mickey sings about cannibals in the song. They would play that at the Mickey Mouse clubs that the kids met with back in the time. Minnie was there from the beginning. She only appeared in 70 shorts, though. And she was based on a flapper, and her full name is Minerva Mouse. That's from The Brave Little Tailor. That's one of his more popular roles he did. I think they still have that around. but the giant smokes, so I don't know.
So yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's a. I heard you. I heard you slip in that trivia question there. Minnie Mouse's full name is Minerva.
mm-hmm.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't think of Minnie having a full name.
No, I used to love that Jack and the Beanstalk with Mickey.
Yeah,
I forgot. I forgot if it was like a viewfinder or something. I don't know.
He fought 3 different giants. There was Willie the Giant and Mickey and the Beanstalk. This one was in Brave Little Tailor, and there was a black and white cartoon where he met a giant. And that's a cartoon that has all the characters. You used to play it every Christmas where they're all ice skating. Well, here's some more trivia on Minnie. In the comics, she has parents that are farm mice, Uncle Milton Mouse, her grandparents are Marvel Mouse and Matilda Mouse. And she has an Uncle Mortimer, and she has twin nieces, Millie and Melody Mouse. They were really partners in the films, but Walt gave an interview in the early 30s where he said they were married. And we have the sheet music coming up here from their wedding. And he said they just enjoyed acting together, but they would never marry the characters today. Even Jim Henson married Kermit and Miss Piggy, but people have erased that. That in the Muppets Take Me Manhattan. Well, they were going to reference it in that when Disney rebooted the Muppets. That's why they had the falling out. It was over their getting married, and Disney made them take it out of the movie. It was filmed though. That was what the falling out was in that Muppet reboot, where the villain Tex Richmond wants to drill for oil in the Muppet Theater, that's the wokeness in that film. But other than that, it was very respectful of who the Muppets were. And they went back to all the original stuff from the 70s and the early 80s, and they referenced it. And that's what you really need to do with these characters. And this is from one that Shirley banned, Mickey's Melodrama, where they do Uncle Tom's Cabin. But people think Uncle Tom is this racist thing, but it was what caused one of the causes of the Civil War, because it chronicled what slavery was about. Mm-hmm. Uncle Tom was a pastor who wouldn't leave his master till he brought him to Jesus. That gets left out too. Uncle Tom wasn't a negative character. He was a positive character from the Christian point of view. He was seen as a Christ-like character, and that's Minnie's Yoo-Hoo there. That's the sheet music for the song. There's the one. It was before that was the sheet music where they got married.
Oh.
Well, no, that's okay. I got going on American history. The wedding of Mr. Mickey Mouse. And I have, when they had the clubs, the Mickey Mouse Club Creed, I will be a square shooter in my home, in school, on playgrounds, and wherever I may be. I will be truthful and honorable and strive always to make myself a better and more useful little citizen. I will respect my elders and the aged, the helpless, and children smaller than myself. In short, I will be a good American. And wow. that was the pledge was Mickey Mice do not swear, smoke, cheat, or lie.
Wow. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Right there. What is this? Every school in America will be closed on October 1st. What? For Mickey Mouse's birthday? What?
Well, that and that wasn't really his birthday. His birthday is in November.
That is...
He was a very popular character. I don't know if that was nationally where they closed all the schools, but some of everything there was local government back then.
Look at what Mickey is reaching for on the wall in the fourth pane.
I was asked last night when we posted the big continuity there what this was from, and it's still in print at an affordable price. The book's out of print, but you can still get it. It's from the 1930s Mickey Mouse comic strip, and Minnie breaks up with him, and she's dating a mouse named Mortimer.
Oh my gosh! What in the world?
Well, he's
gonna kill himself.
That's not the only one. This all comes out of the silent comedies like Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. They would do things like this. It was dark humor. Well, next one, I think, the full page one there. I don't know if you can zoom in on that, but the one at the top, the two in the top we just saw close up, but the bottom two, there he tries to jump off a bridge. And then the last one, he turns the gas on and goes to sleep trying to suffocate himself. And that's how Walt's mother died. So I don't know how he felt about that after this. This was way before that happened.
Oh my goodness.
But everything backfired on him when he tried to kill himself.
Yeah. Now, think of if he had been successful. Okay.
Oh, he wouldn't have been.
Then what would we have missed out on?
Well, maybe he did kill himself, and the one that has the eyes that we know today, that's the imposter Mickey.
I'll try to get back to these pictures.
There was an assessment of Mickey about 20 years ago, and I think it perfectly assesses this. When Mickey looked like that, they said he went from being a hip black dude to a boring white guy. And there's and it was a black person that I think that said this, but there's a lot of truth in that. Because he was a different character back then. He was spunkier and he did all these things, but then they kept having to pull away because Walt would get letters from others about how Mickey was behaving and everything. Now, Mickey got an Oscar in 1932. Walt got an Oscar for creating Mickey Mouse. And there's like 3 pictures here with him with the Oscar.
And so he would get letters from moms that were upset with the way Mickey behaved.
They would always send Walt letters, even with the comics that Walt had nothing to do with. That's why he would put people in place that would uphold his values. I think that's Walt. That was Walt with his wife. That's Walt with Roy. That's Walt with Clarence Ducky Nash, who did Donald Duck. That's the different.
Donald Duck is right there.
Well, we're gonna have a whole folder about him, so that's okay. But he was only 5'2". These are all the different character costumes back then.
Not good. Not good at all. No, sir. Woo.
Well, what ended up happening with the Mickey Mouse dolls is there was a woman who wrote Walt about making dolls, and this is the story of these dolls that we keep showing in all these photos from the past shows. And she made a deal to do the dolls. Her name was Charlotte Clark. I don't have a photo of her, but her nephew was Bob Clampett, who went on to direct a lot of the early Looney Tunes, and he created Beanie and Cecil, and he did stuff with puppets, and he helped design the Mickey Mouse dolls. And because when companies would do all these Mickey things, he looks kind of creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a statue that was made by the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum of Mickey Mouse, and it looks really creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But Madame Tussauds is still around, and this is a different parade than the Macy parade. This one I think was in Boston, but it's a different balloon than we had the show where we showed the Mickey balloon. And that's his mail again. I put one in there for that to compare just how popular he was. I thought that was kind of funny. For New Year's, somebody put a Mickey Mouse mask on. And that's the Mickey Mouse Club, how they would meet in the theaters.
Look at that. That's just one town.
Yeah. That's when they had the big movie palaces they no longer have.
Right.
Now, these Mickey Mouse dolls, Walt and Roy hired this woman when she proposed this. They put her in a house, and she had 5 people who worked with her, and they made 400 Mickey Mouse dolls a week. These are the regular ones they would sell for $5. I don't think they sold the big ones. Those are the regular ones there. And they couldn't meet the demand, and what Walt eventually did was he let them put the plan out in McCall's magazine so people could make their own Mickeys. That's Walt with his wife. And when Kay Kamen came along, he still kept Charlotte Clark in charge of doing the Mickeys, but they did them on a mass scale. I'm not sure what award Walt's getting there. This was a snow contest where they made snow Mickeys. Now it was Freddie Moore redesigned Mickey there, and that's what he looks like today. Mickey and the Beanstalk. And that's Minnie there, what she looks like today, but this was in the 1940s. And this was the Mickey Mouse Club in the 50s. There's a whole series of photos of that where they're having this birthday cake for the show. There he is with all the Mouseketeers. But Mickey was always there, part of his career, and that's Mickey's Christmas Carol there. These paintings were done every 10 years by John Hench, and these were Mickey's official portraits. And so we have a couple of those. And he was the employee that was there the longest of any employee. He started in the 1930s, and he just died about 10 years ago, I think. But he was considered Mickey's official portrait painter, even though he'd gone into Imagineering and everything. In those black and white Mickeys, there's 70 of those. There's over 70 black and white Mickey Mouse cartoons. And Walt didn't go to color till the band concert one because the Mickey Mouse cartoons were still profitable.
Oh, now we're on the radio.
This is the radio. Mickey had a radio show, and we were going to link to this too. It's called Mickey Mouse's Theater of the Air. It was a weekly show. It started a lot of Walt's characters interacting with each other. So this was like a shared universe. And in one of the first ones, Snow White premiered, and the Snow White and the dwarves were there. And Walt's even a character in that episode. And they'd wanted to do these shows for years, but Walt always resisted. But he ended up doing them because it was to tie in with Mickey Mouse or Snow White. It was sponsored by Pepsodent. And Walt didn't do the voice on all the shows. He was too busy. So after a few episodes, another person took over. And Donald Duck's on the shows, and he quickly surpassed Mickey in popularity.
Really?
Oh yeah, we'll get into that when we get to Donald. Okay. The Disney Ducks in general were all because of Donald. Donald's probably their most successful character because of that.
Okay.
The reason Donald became more popular is because the more restrictions put on Mickey, it was harder to come up with Mickey Mouse stories. So they would come up with Mickey Mouse stories, and they started pushing the envelope on it, and then they became Donald Duck stories because Donald gets mad at people all the time and has tantrums. And Mickey's became more like a straight man. Now, Jimmy McDonald took over. He's on the right there. I think that's Catherine Beaumont, who was Alice and Wendy for the features, but he took over being Mickey's voice. He was a lot of the voices. He did the special effects at the studio. He started in 1934. He created all these things that made the sound effects. Like he invented his own sound effects. Today,
that's gotta be fun.
Oh, there's footage of him where he shows some of his. I think he's even in the Reluctant Dragon we've mentioned before. They show all these people in the studio doing their thing, and he invented the rain barrel with the nails in it, and it has little peas in it, and or beans or peas. You roll the barrel, and it sounds like a rainstorm, and that's how they did that in the films. How he did lightning was that he took a piece of sheet metal and he would shake it, and that would make the lightning sound. But a lot of these people were happy people, and a lot of them look alike as they aged. But he was the one that took over for Mickey, and then he trained the Mickey that took over in the 80s. He took over on Mickey and the Beanstalk because it became hard for Walt to do the voice because of his smoker voice. And but Walt still did it for some of the Mickey Mouse Club things. Now Mickey had barnyard friends in the beginning, and some of the ones that disappeared, there was Patricia Pig, Claus the Cat, Robert the Rooster, turkeys, geese, chickens, but the ones that stuck around were Clarabelle Cow and Horace Horsecollar. And they were gone for many years, but they brought them back in recent years. And sometimes Clarabelle Cow is called Carolyn Cow, and she appeared in 34 cartoons, and her last one in the original run was in 1942. But she continued to appear in the comic strip in the comics. And they gave her a personality in the comics where she's a gossip and she's Minnie's best friend. And in the earlier cartoons, they showed the cow udders, but then when the Motion Picture Producer Association came into being in 1934, you couldn't show cow udders anymore. So that's why she has a skirt after that. And I guess now in the modern stuff, they have her set up with Goofy as a couple, but her boyfriend was always Horace Horsecollar. So I reject that. Whoever revised that, it's always Clarabelle Cow and Horace Horsecollar.
$0.10, May 1941.
Mm-hmm. No, all these characters were merchandised and everything. I mean, they were known by the average person back then. Clarabelle Cow and Horace Horsecollar. He started a year after her. He's starting to make his way in here. There he is on the right, in the boat, making her do all the work, I guess. But he debuted in 1929. He was originally called Henry the Horse. He appeared in 23 shorts, and his last short was also the same short. It was a Symphony Hour, the last one. Both of them together. See, they were marionettes there. This was before Goofy. Because what eventually happened with Horace Horsecollar, he was Mickey's best friend in the comics, but Goofy ended up replacing Horace in that regard. And in the 90s, they were going to bring Horace Horsecollar back as a follow-up to Darkwing Duck. And the show was going to be called Maximum Horsepower. And the backstory was, where's Horace been all these years? And what the story was going to be was, Horace found out Mickey got the lead role in Sorcerer's Apprentice, so he was going to go to Walt's office and chew him out, and he gets abducted by aliens. They take him across the galaxy, and they make him into a hero to save their people. In the whole series, he's trying to get back to Earth, but he's stuck being a hero, but he was going to be a selfish character. But what ended up happening was they wanted to do shorts, or they wanted to do Disney afternoon shows based on the features like Aladdin and Little Mermaid and all that. So they quit doing these original series. So Maximum Horsepower didn't get made. But that premise, I think it went with Jeffrey Katzenberg to DreamWorks and became Galaxy Quest. Because that's pretty much what Galaxy Quest was. The aliens thought that the Captain Kirk Star Trek people were real heroes, and that this is the whole cast of characters there.
Oh my gosh, Donald Duck has changed.
Well, that's what he originally looked like. We'll get into him, but he started in the Silly Symphony. He wasn't set out to be a major character.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a cool picture there.
That's from that On Ice cartoon. And he was in the Mickey Mouse Club opening there, the Horace Horsecollar. But when one of the things we'll link to is the opening of the Mickey Mouse Club. A lot of these characters we're going to talk about, they appear in that opening, and you'll know who they all are now. And that's from that On Ice cartoon.
Oh, cool.
They
eventually have a set of cards.
They eventually put him in the overalls. I wonder what a set of those cards are worth. It's in nice condition.
Boy.
That's where he was Mickey's best friend, telling him not to go to this mansion. And I think he gets kidnapped by a mad scientist is what happens there. But that's from Mickey's melodrama. Melodrammer. For a while, they were together, Goofy and Horace. That's a postage stamp. The characters are on a lot of postage stamps around the world. People probably don't realize that. When I was a kid, you get the little ads. You could buy Disney stamps in the mail. That was the last cartoon where they both appeared under Walt's time was the Symphony Hour. And that was the closest I could find to a reference to that Maximum Horsepower show. It's a comic from Europe.
Wow.
But I think that with Disney never was, that would have been an interesting series.
Yeah. All right, now it's time for my buddy Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto. He debuted in 1930 in that cartoon where Mickey's in prison. He was one of the hound dogs that went to hunt him down. And that's what he looked like in the beginning. But even that's from a trading card in the 90s. You could still see this stuff. Oh. And that one there, that's from the 30s there. And Pluto appeared in 89 shorts. And he had his own series starting in 1937. A lot of these characters got their own series starting in 1937. But that's when Snow White came out. So that kind of makes sense that they would start focusing on their own series after that. Because Walt was focusing more on features. They chose the name Pluto because the planet was discovered at the time. I don't know what the status is on the planet now.
It's hard to keep up.
But in the 1930s, he was the only character that was mute, that was a popular character, really. And that's Figaro from Pinocchio. She appeared in, I guess, some sources say Figaro's a boy. Some say it's a girl.
Okay.
But Figaro got its own series as well, and would always be paired with Pluto usually. Figaro was Minnie's cat, and Pluto had two girlfriends in the shorts. One, and we'll have pictures of them here. One's Fifi, and she was Minnie's dog, and there was a dachshund named Dinah, and that was the other girlfriend. And there was one where he had kids, and one was named Pluto Jr. You don't ever hear about that anymore. They had puppies. And his enemy was Butch the Bulldog, and they would fight over bones and things like that. That's when he would star in a short. Disney always opened theirs with a starburst. That's Fifi there. I'm not sure how many shorts she was in, but that's the two girlfriends together there. That's Dinah as the Dachshund.
Pluto, you dog. See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Canine Casanova, Pluto.
When Figaro spun off to its own series, there were 7 Figaro shorts. That's Pluto with the puppies there.
That is awesome.
Well, I tried to get a sampling of each character. I know there's probably more photos than we need, but I just wanted people to see what some of these were, because we can't show the actual shorts here. It'd probably take a whole day if we showed clips of them.
Yeah.
That Figaro blames him for breaking a vase or something there.
Oh, no. That looks like trouble setting up there. Figaro and Frankie.
I think that one, Minnie thinks that Figaro ate Frankie. But you don't think of that Figaro got the own series there, but I don't know if Figaro is a boy or girl. Pluto had comics, so I had some covers here. Comics aren't a popular thing anymore, but back then you'd go to the local store and there would be comics in the comic book rack, and that still went on when we were kids.
Sure did. Yeah. Wow.
And I think Goofy's next.
Let's see here. You are correct, sir.
Goofy debuted in 1932. We have a picture of what he looked like then. He was known as Dippy Dog, but it was dog spelled D-A-W-G.
There we go.
And he stood out because of his unique laugh. And we'll talk about his voice in a second. And what they ended up doing was they put him in another cartoon. It was called Mickey's Whoopee Party. And he was paired with Mickey and Donald in some of these shorts. That's from the comics there. And we mentioned Art Babbitt before. He was the one that really developed Goofy into a personality. And in 1933 in the comics, Goofy started appearing as Mickey's neighbor, and then he became the best friend replacing Horace. And Goofy got his own series in 1939. And we'll have a picture of that there where he's with a grasshopper. The grasshopper is named Wilbur. And in some of the stories, Wilbur is Jiminy Cricket's cousin. In the 1950s, Goofy would play a character known as George G. Geef, and they would be Goofy without the teeth. Goofy starred in 56 shorts by himself, and he was in 3 episodes of Walt's TV show. And he had a whole comic book career, and one of the ones we're going to have pictures of is one called Super Goof. Whenever he would eat a goober, which is a peanut, he would become Super Goof, and it ran for 75 issues. And the only person who knew who Goofy really was his nephew Gilbert. And Gilbert never made it to animation, but he was known from being in the comics. And in a few of the later shorts, Goofy had a son known as Goofy Jr. Even his wife was in it, but you didn't ever see what her face looked like. And we'll have a picture of Goofy Jr. near the end here. But Goofy Jr. became Max on Goof Troop. He even had Goofy Jr. had red hair, and that's Wilbur there. That's a great short. I think I linked to it in our links. And that's from Mickey and the Beanstalk. That was the last time Mickey, Donald, and Goofy appeared together in a cartoon. This one we linked to. It's one about smoking. And it's all about how he's addicted to smoking, trying to stop. And that's a good time to bring up. It's been brought to my attention now with editing the photos of Walt smoking. That's a Motor Mania where he gets behind the wheel and he becomes a Mr. Hyde and he runs down pedestrians.
Oh, what? Oh, no.
That's Mrs. Goofy there in the upper left. And that's the
Oh,
in the
wow.
bottom. But you never saw what her face looked like. No one knows what happened to
Yeah.
Mrs. Goofy.
That's
And
kind of like, was it Vera? Is that her name on Cheers with Norm's wife? Like you'd never see her
Mhm.
face.
that was Goofy Jr. there. And that was the original artwork for Goof Troop. You see how he was based a little older on Goofy Jr.
Absolutely. Okay, so you started to say something that's
Yeah, with the
very
cigarettes.
fascinating.
Yeah, this is so
Okay,
interesting. So
yes,
they've
it
gone
is.
in and they've erased Walt smoking with the cigarette. So he's always got two fingers like this. So what Disney is officially telling people now at the parks, they have to point with two fingers because Walt pointed with two fingers, but he had a cigarette between his fingers. They just erased the cigarette. So they had to come up with an excuse why he's always got his hands like fingers like that in these photos. It's because he's had a cigarette in his fingers, and they should use this to teach you: don't smoke, and you could have built Epcot.
Right.
I was a kid and I figured that out. That's why I never was tempted in all this stuff because he didn't get to do what he wanted to do because he took all these years off his life smoking. And the studio nurse tried to get him to stop and he struggled with it and he never could stop. I mean, it's really a sad story, but that was his vice. That's why we lost Walt Disney when we did.
Right.
And instead of making a teachable moment, wokeism erases things. Then they got a couple of excuses to explain why they're hiding why his fingers are pointing like that. So now they tell the people at Disneyland, you point with two fingers because Walt pointed with two fingers. When you finish up through there, I'll get onto his voice. His voice was Pinto Colvig.
Okay.
And his father was a judge. Pinto Colvig was a high school dropout. He attended college sporadically, which is interesting because now if you drop out of school, you can't go to college. But back then, you didn't have to have a high school diploma. You could go into the workforce. You could go to college and not have it was based on what you knew. It was merit based. But Pinto Colvig, this is a quote from him. He said, "I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to either be a clown, draw cartoons, write, be a hobo, or a musician. So I wrapped it all up together, made a stew out of it." And he joined a circus. He was a clown. We have photos of him in one of the. I think it's still in the Goofy folder. There's a folder. Okay. Pinto Colvig. He performed on vaudeville with an act with the clarinet. He was a newspaper cartoonist. He got into animation in the 19-teens. He worked at several animation studios. They did a feature, they did a sound film and different things, but they're lost now. That's the studio he worked at. And I don't know what the name of it was, but he was a very innovative person. This is Pinto Colvig, voice of Goofy.
That's the voice of Goofy.
That's I love original voice of Goofy. I'll wait till you find out who he was later in life. Okay. He worked for Walter Lantz when they took over the Oswald cartoons. He was an animator. He got hired at Disney in 1930. He did several of the characters. He did the sounds for Pluto. He was the practical pig. He was grumpy. He was sleepy. He was a character we're going to have that was the Arcuvian bird. He left Disney in 1938. So this is why in the shorts, Goofy loses his voice and there's a narrator narrating the action. It's because Pinto Colvig left the studio.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but he came back to the studio. He was Bozo the Clown. He was also, if you know who Bozo the Clown was, he was the original Bozo the Clown in the 1940s. And he also smoked and he died of lung cancer in 1967. But he was one of the advocates who wanted to have warnings on cigarette packs, and that's his gravesite. See, people think of this stuff as kids stuff, and a lot of the grave sites for these people, it references the characters they were.
That's very cool. Okay.
But most people probably don't know who Bozo the Clown is anymore either. And Bozo even had, he was in cartoons, and he was also on records and things.
All right. Mortimer, I believe.
Mortimer, very minor character. He was in one short, but he had a life in the comics. He's a caricature of Walt as a mouse. And you remember Mortimer was the name of Mickey originally. He's Minnie's old boyfriend, but he's kind of a jerk. And in the comics originally, he was called Mr. Slicker. He's selfish and arrogant, and he's a show off. And that's in this one short. And he gets a bowl angered, and then he runs off in his car and leaves, and Mickey has to take care of Minnie and save her from the bowl. But then he was also in the comics. And that's where he's mostly been. I guess now they've got him back in animated things on television and everything, but I'm not very familiar with it.
You go, Mickey.
I would cast John Lovitz as that voice now.
Yes.
He always does that. He does that kind of slick salesman kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the ticket.
Yeah, that would be what I would cast as Morton. That's from the comics there.
I love it. Good stuff. Alrighty. Clara Cluck.
And she was in 8 shorts altogether, but she originally starred in The Wise Hen. She wasn't known as Clara Cluck there, but was the same actress, and that character developed into Clara Cluck. That's the same thing that happened with Goofy being Dippy Dog. And she became, in the comics, is where she really took off. She became Daisy Duck's best friend. And in the animated cartoon, she's an opera diva. And in the comics, she dates a character we're going to get to called Gus Goose, who was Donald's cousin. And a later character named Panchito Rooster will have him in his own little thing too. But this was who Clara was, and this is her in animation where she was all designed out. And if you watch The Reluctant Dragon, there's a scene where she sings opera with Donald Duck. They show the Clarence, Ducky, Nash, and her voice singing the opera, so you can see how a cartoon's made. I think it's for this. It's made for the. It's for this short. It's supposed to be for this short, where the Orphans Benefit. And they remade The Orphans Benefit twice. But a lot of these characters, they had lives in print media, and this is from a children's book. And you see there she is with Clarabelle Cow and Mickey and Donald and everybody. That's Panchito Rooster. That's the other boyfriend she had. And Donald also debuted in The Wise Little Hen, and he's our next character. And the cartoon was in 1934 as part of the Silly Symphony series. If we have time at the end, we'll get some of the Silly Symphonies characters in. Donald debuted with Wise Hen, and his buddy in the cartoon was Peter Pig. They tried to break him out to be a character standalone as well, but he never caught on. Interestingly, Porky Pig was the Looney Tunes character that caught on after this. I don't know if Porky was inspired by Peter Pig.
Oh, interesting.
Well, as you'll learn later, if we did get Silly Symphonies, Bugs Bunny is a ripoff of a Silly Symphonies character. But Donald he started out as just a funny voice, and he went beyond a funny voice. He gained a personality as they kept putting him in shorts with Mickey. He started out being a pest to Mickey, and then he gradually evolved into a different kind of character. That's what Walt kept doing with. He'd co-star the characters with each other, Goofy, Mickey, and Donald.
Look at that rudimentary.
That was the original doll. As you mean, look how ugly it is. But that's how I would draw Donald, kind of like that when I was a kid. Just very simple shapes.
Whoa.
These are the costumes. I stuck some of those in there. The experts would write articles analyzing Donald, and Walt hated them, and he would say that he always had a nightmare where he pictures himself where his films are stuck playing in art theaters, and he wakes up shaking. Because they would analyze. People identified with Donald during the Great Depression because he was an emotional character, and he would get angry. And the studio background for his biography, they say he was born on Friday the 13th in one stormy March. And Donald has a middle name. It's Fauntleroy. And his mother is named Hortense, and she's Uncle Scrooge's sister. And his dad's name is Quackmore, and he is Grandma Duck's son. And in The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck that came out in the 90s, they have them together. And Donald had a crush on Shirley Temple, and they put Shirley Temple in a cartoon with Donald.
That's hysterical.
Well, and back then, like Charlie McCarthy would have fights towards W.C. Fields on their own shows. They would say things insultingly to each other. And I don't know if we really have anything like that today, but they would be feuds, but they'd be fake feuds. Right. These are some of the educational things that Donald did. And this is from Donald Math Magic Land. And everyone always, the conspiracy people point out where he has a pentagram on his hand. This is because they're telling that's how the Greeks had their elite people, and that was part of their secret handshake. They would have a pentagram on their hand. Had nothing to do with Illuminati, Freemasonry, Satanism. It was part of this historical cartoon. But you'll see that picture coming along. That's why I wanted to debunk that. Donald went on to, he was in a couple of features with those Latin American shorts. That's his uncle, Ludwig von Drake, and we'll get into him a little bit later. Donald was also the first popular character combined in a Technicolor film with live action and animation. It was a test, and that was before Song of the South. It was in these Latin American shorts. The last film he was in with Mickey and Goofy was Mickey and the Beanstalk. He was on several episodes of Walt's TV show, and that's what this is from. We'll link to some of those. One of them is called A Day in the Life of Donald Duck. These are some of the products. You can still get Donald Duck orange juice today at Dollar Tree. I've seen it there, but that goes all the way back to when Walt was alive. I've seen photos with, I couldn't find them online, but there's photos with Walt posing with Donald Duck products. This is Daisy. She started out as Senorita Duck. It was Donna Duck.
Donna Duck.
That was her original name. She disappeared for a couple of years. This was 1937, but the first Daisy was, Donna Duck. She's Hispanic. But they always say that's the original Daisy. It's not a different character because of, like Dippy Dog and all that. And this is how she looked in 1940. She was created by Carl Barks, who went on to do the Duck comics. He started, we'll get into him a little bit, but he started out working in the animation studio. So a lot of these characters with Donald in these shorts, he created them, but then he developed them more in the comics. They brought Donna back in some of the comics, and she was Daisy's rival. Daisy was only in 11 animated shorts.
Oh, wow.
But, well, she got developed in the 40s, and she was, in the comics, she was more well-rounded of a character, and she was smarter than Donald. This is from his original comic. It was an abandoned short, and it was Donald Finds Pirate's Gold. I've never read it. They haven't reprinted it yet. I hope they still will, because they're doing the complete Carl Barks. This is Daisy in some of the comics. One of the exchanges she had in the comics was with Uncle Scrooge, and she said, why haven't you ever considered marriage, Uncle Scrooge? And Scrooge says, I have. I consider it a nuisance. And Daisy says, but a bachelor has nobody to share his troubles with. And Scrooge says, why should a bachelor have any troubles? Because Scrooge was a cranky guy in the beginning.
That's funny.
And according to Don Rosa, who did the comics in the 90s, he's considered the heir of Carl Barks. He says that Daisy's brother is the father of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, because where they're from, the Duck is like Smith.
Wait a minute, I got to go back to that. Sodas 14 cents, Sundays 22 cents. Love it. 19. Where are we at on this?
I'm not sure. That 19... one could be in this. That could be in the 50s.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's later. I can't make it out. But
where we are.
That's okay.
Let's see here. You can continue on with your presentation, and I will find out where I left off.
Well, there was when Walt put all the characters, he spun them off into their own series. There was like one unit would just do the Donald Duck ones, one would just do Goofy. The head of the Donald Duck unit was a guy named, I don't have a photo of him, but his name was Jack Hanna. He worked with Carl Barks on these original Donald Duck shorts, and that's where they really shaped his personality and everything. This was a World War II cartoon, but people wonder if that inspired Uncle Scrooge. This is a thrifty,
good drawing. That is awesome, man.
Thrifty. See how the wall looks like an American flag?
Yeah.
It was about saving up during the war. It was the thrift character was a Scotsman. And my ancestors are Scottish. I'm not offended by it, and that's how I feel about all this stuff. People shouldn't be offended by this stuff.
Right. Good stuff. Okay.
Some of his co-stars, I think, are next. But the Jack Hanna, he went on to direct some of Walt's TV episodes with the animated characters, and then he eventually did Woody Woodpecker and Popeye cartoons to other places, and he ended up teaching at Walt's school in 1975 with Tee-Hee. Now this is that's Floyd Gottfredson there. That's who did the Mickey Mouse comic. I think we still had another folder in the Donald folder.
Oh! I'm sorry.
Because it had all of his co-stars.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll get back there.
Well, I tried to keep it easier to go through. I don't know. We're still figuring these out. We haven't figured out, and then we're all done with the shows.
Oh, my bad. Yep. Let's see. Where do you want me to go
I
next,
think it was
Clarence? You said.
Clarence, Ducky, Nash.
Yeah.
We can go there first. I got to find my notes on him now. I had them somewhere here.
Oh no! Wait, where do you where do you want me to go?
I
Clarence?
got him. Yeah, go to
or the
Clarence
other
Nash.
guy?
I got him here.
Okay.
How he got started at Disney. He was a milkman, and he stopped at the studio, and he on a whim, and he did a audition, and he did the voice. He said it was a baby goat, and he read "Mary Has a Little Lamb." And that Donald dummy there that got made, that was made by the model department that Joe Grant. He's got it all through here, so it's okay. He would do the voice, and he did this well into his old age. And when they hired him, he was the 125th employee that worked for Walt. And when he took off, he would do radio appearances and things. He would do appearances at Disney movie premieres. That's him near the end of his life there in the 80s. He also voiced Daisy in some of the cartoons and Huey, Dewey, and Louie. He did other voices in other films as well. But he was one of the first Disney celebrities. And if you watch and see that, I thought that was kind of sweet too. They got Donald and Daisy on the grave with his wife. Both Pinto Colvig and Clarence Nash, they were married with their wives for their whole lives. They didn't have multiple wives. It was a love affair their whole life. Margaret was Clarence's high school sweetheart.
And started off as the milkman at Disney.
He wasn't the milkman at Disney. He was stopped on his route at Disney.
Oh, on his route. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't even on his route. He was filling in that day.
Oh, wow. See, kids, you don't know until you try. Right?
He did that voice for 51 years. The last time he did the voice was in Mickey's Christmas Carol.
That's awesome.
But we always mention the Reluctant Dragon. They have him in there, and he's also going to be he's in one of the links we have with the TV series, A Day in the Life of Donald Duck, where Donald gets into an argument with Clarence Nash on how he makes him sound.
Let's see.
And then there's one with the co-stars.
The co-stars, South America.
Yeah, these are the different birds from those South American shorts. All these birds had they all spun off into the comics as well. So that's why I mentioned them. But they were in some of the shorts. This first one's Jose Carica. I hope I say his name right.
Wait, what is it? Jose
Carica. Carica. I know I had it pronounced right before, before the show. But he always had a cigar.
Yeah, I know this guy.
Ward Kimball animated him. He's supposed to represent Brazil, and he appeared in the Latin American shorts. And now when they use him, he doesn't have the cigar. He was on a few of Walt's TV shows as well. He was a merchandised character. He was, this character was well known at the time, but he was only in a few shorts. But he was, what they've done with these characters from South America, they made him like Donald's college buddies. Like they come and visit him, and they go on adventures and reunions and things. But he was the most popular of the two, I think. Well, there's three, but one of them wasn't really one of the. He didn't really speak. This is the Arcuian bird. He doesn't speak. He just sings this little song and makes a noise. I can't imitate it, but I know the tune. But he was in those shorts as well. He's been in the comics. Now, the Three Caballeros introduces Panchito Pistols, and he represents Mexico. And he's also in the global comics. He has a horse. His name is Senor Martinez. And he also dated Clara Cluck in the comics. There was going to be another character. There was going to be Cuba, but they shut this. This was during when they were having trouble with keeping the studio open. I have pictures of what he would have been. So this is a character that most people have never even heard of among all these characters. This character was for Cuba. His name was, they settled on Pancho, but they were going to call him Gyro, Guajiro. And he was a cockfighting rooster from Cuba. And we haven't got to him yet, but we will. Okay. But the Three Caballeros came back. I haven't seen it, but they did a series called the Legend of the Three Caballeros. And I know it's on Disney Plus. And from what I've seen of it, it looks like the shows that they did in the 90s with the Disney afternoon characters, that kind of thing where they respected the heritage of the characters in the past. That's a model sheet for the Arcurian bird. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. But he was kind of like, he was a wacky character, but he was kind of like the Dodo in Looney Tunes. This was like the Disney version of that. You see, he's smoking a cigar there because that didn't offend people back then.
Oh,
yeah. That Donald rejects him, so he's going to kill himself. You see all the poison there and all the other weapons.
I see all this.
We can't have cartoons like that now. Donald with a machine gun.
I mean, God.
This was a patent, I guess, for a doll, and that's a Those are statues where they were merchandised.
Oh wait, go back. Yeah, okay.
I just happened to come upon that when I was looking for photos of him. Some of them I've scanned, but a lot of them I got online because there was a lot of characters to go through. This is at one of the parks where they have them on the wall. How many people know who Panchito and Jose are?
Yeah, no. Okay, this is the this is in Epcot. This is the ride there that you take inside. I think it's in Mexico there, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's good.
That's good. You recognize them. This is Pablo the Penguin. He was also in one of those Latin American shorts, and he had a career in the comics. He was merchandised, and I have a picture of some of the merchandising. He was a penguin who wanted to go north because he wanted to be warm. And he's in the cartoon with a little pot-bellied stove. It's narrated by Sterling Holloway, who ended up doing Winnie the Pooh, a lot of voices, but those are some ceramic sculptures they did of those characters in the 1940s. And that's an example where they mixed him with live action in this short, but that went on to be for Song of the South. This is where this cockfighting rooster from Cuba, and the film was going to be called Carnival, and he always has a cigar because it's Cuban cigars, and I guess the film was going to have a lot of cigar play in it. Like they made it a big part of Carnival. Those were designed by Freddie Moore, who was designing a lot of the Disney characters at the time. And the reason they didn't do the short is because the studio was trying to stay open at the time, and these films weren't. They closed the program. But remember, these are made to keep communism, socialism out of Latin America. And maybe if they'd done the Cuban one, Castro wouldn't have come to power. Now that's from that when they were going to do the short of Donald with pirate gold. I think that's the Arcudian bird because of the hair and the beak and everything. And he was going to cameo in that. But it shows you how the characters would appear in different things. I think next is Chip and Dale, our Chip and Dale.
You got it. Yep.
Chip and Dale, they debuted in a 1943 Pluto cartoon for World War II, and they were trying to hide nuts in the gunnery thing. It was a little hut with a gun in it, and they would hide the nuts in the gun as well. And they originally looked alike in this first cartoon. Bill Peet came up with the idea to make Dale a goofball, so they changed what Dale would look like. And they appeared in 23 cartoons, and they had their own series in 1951. They were a lot of LPs and comics. And one time they hosted Walt's show, and that's one of the links we're going to have. But they kept pairing him with Donald because they would annoy Donald. If you see some of these shorts with Donald, they're real jerks. One of them, they blow his house up.
What?
Yeah, he's a lumberjack, and they end up blowing his house up, and then they make fun of him, and they laugh after his house blows up, and like, oh, that's too bad. And Jimmy McDonald was the voices of Chip and Dale. Sometimes they would have studio. In this one, they're living in his railroad in the backyard. If you remember, I said Walt had the railroad in the backyard. There's a short where Donald has a railroad in the backyard. And they brought Chip and Dale back, for Rescue Rangers in the 80s. And Chip is dressed like Indiana Jones. And the reason Dale has a Hawaiian shirt on is he's supposed to be Magnum PI. But that's how I think the Disney afternoon shorts, that was the last time the characters were respected for who they were. And they tried to build on the heritage. And that's their girlfriend Clarice, where they're both fighting for her in one of the cartoons. They both want her attention, and she flirts with both of them. But we can't show cartoons like that anymore. And I've seen the movie that's on Disney Plus, and I didn't really care for it. It's more like a Roger Rabbit update. They do weird things like Gadget is married to Zipper the Fly, and they have mutant fly babies.
Okay.
But I guess people didn't like that movie because they have somebody, the Peter Pan trafficking the cartoon, so it's like human trafficking. Now this one, this was Spike the Bee was a character that came. This is folder's about, but before that, they had these ants that they stole Donald's picnic food. Now the ants we can't have because now they're considered black people.
What?
Well, you go back there, and the one is Stepin Fetchit. He was a character played by a black guy, and he's in the lower left of that model sheet. And they did it to be funny. They made him a tribe of ants. And it wasn't to be offensive, but now it's banned. Now, Spike the Bee was also known as Barrington and Buzz Buzz, and he appeared in 13 Donald Duck cartoons. And he was also in Rescue Rangers and a few other of the 90s shows, 80s and 90s shows. But he also is in the Disney parks, and I have a couple statues of Buzz Buzz coming up here. You see Spike, Buzz Buzz, Barrington. This is a bottle they sell at Epcot, I guess. But this is one of the statues in Epcot. But he's a minor character, but he was in 13 shorts, so that's why I included him. I think Humphrey the Bear and Ranger Audubon Woodlore are next. Humphrey Bear debuted in 1953. Now these characters, Hanna-Barbera ripped off Yogi Bear on these. He debuted in 1953. He was the last character to headline his own series, Humphrey the Bear. He was in 8 shorts altogether. He was in several of Walt's TV shows. He was a popular but short-lived character because this is when the families were going to the national parks and everything. That's how this came about. He also appeared in Rescue Rangers. Now, Smokey the Bear, stop there for a second because I didn't have this in my notes, but this is a great fact. Smokey the Bear was created because originally Walt licensed the Bambi characters to the federal government to do no forest fire commercials and things in theaters, and they did posters. Well, the government didn't want to pay Walt a licensing fee on the Bambi characters after that, so they created Smokey the Bear. But Smokey appears in this short in the bag. He has a cameo. I kept meaning to mention that, but we never came up in a show. Ranger J. Audubon Woodlore, he was the ranger of Brownstone National Park, and he appeared in several of these 5 shorts. He did 2 episodes of Walt's TV show. He was on record albums. He was a foil for Humphrey the Bear and Donald Duck. In one of the Donald shorts, Donald destroys the Grand Canyon with a Confederate lion that's been there since the Confederacy, the Civil War.
With a Confederate what?
He's got a Confederate hat because they said the last time the lion's been seen in the Grand Canyon was in the Civil War. And when they say that, the lion puts the Confederate hat on and he whistles Dixie. And he destroys the Grand Canyon with Donald. Okay. Then the ranger makes them dig it out with a shovel. That was the end of the cartoon. But they still merchandise Ranger Woodlore and Humphrey the Bear in the theme parks. And I remember that when they had the Disney store, they had Beanie Babies of those guys. But the Ranger sounds like Mr. Smee. I've linked to some cartoons with these guys. Perfect. And there was a famous dance at the time in the 60s named after Humphrey the Bear called the Humphrey Hop. And that there was a short where he appeared with the ducks, the nephews. He teaches them conservation. That's from the Grand Canyon cartoon, I think. That's the name of the cartoon, Grand Canyon Scope. It's probably on Disney Plus. It's a widescreen thing. Ranger Woodlore was originally called the Little Ranger. That's when he destroys the Grand Canyon, Donald. But you can see how that character influenced Yogi Bear and Ranger Smith. That's his record album, A Guide to Nature. But he sounds like Mr. Smee for the voice. It's the same actor. Now the next one's Floyd Gottfredson with the Disney comics, and I'll just start talking. You just go through them there. Then we gotta get to the ducks.
Let's see. Who am I looking for again?
Oh, I think it was the comics. There was, and it was the one you opened by accident. It was the next folder. Floyd Gottfredson. He was the guy who started the Disney Mickey Mouse. Well, he didn't start it. He took over for Rob Iwerks, but he started in Disney in 1929. He comes from a large Mormon family. He got injured in a hunting accident as a boy, and when he was recovering in bed, he learned how to draw, and that's how he became interested in art.
That sounds familiar. That's Walt's story.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing. A lot of these guys have similar stories like that, and they all, come from the Midwest. But I mentioned his Mormon upbringing because Walt put him in charge of the Mickey Mouse comic strip, and that was his ethics as a Mormon that influenced what he did with Mickey. So Walt would put people in these positions where he knew that he could trust them to be a steward of his characters, because he didn't approve every single thing they did, but he would get angry letters if they didn't fit to his ideals from the the mothers and everything. These are all paintings he did. You can just scroll through them as I go here. But he did these in the 70s and 80s. They're all based on his Mickey Mouse comic strip stories. All these come from the stories he was doing for 45 years. He did the Mickey Mouse comic strip. And in the days before video and DVD and everything, this is primarily how people would know these characters day to day. That was from the comic strip. People don't understand how popular comic strips were back then. You'd buy newspapers just to see what your characters were doing in the comic strip each day. And a lot of times they'd have continuities. The Mickeys had continuities every day. They'd go on adventures. And they would probably take 6 months or 3 months. You go through the whole adventure. And then a new one would start, like a soap opera. It would lead into the next adventure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that's something that's lost today. And how he ended up doing the strip was he wanted to leave Disney when Ub Iwerks left. He wanted to leave with Ub, and Roy wouldn't let him out of the contract. So Walt assigned him to do the Mickey Mouse strip temporarily, but it ended up being his whole career. And the thing I point out with him being a Mormon, Carl Barks was an atheist, and he did the Donald Duck comics and Uncle Scrooge and all that. But here you have people from different worldviews and everything, but they were united in how they handled the characters. And today it's not like that anymore. Everybody wants to inject their beliefs, personal beliefs, into these characters that they don't like. They were selling the Walt Disney brand, and they understood that, and everything they did, they told these stories. But what I think that united them was the American culture in general, because that was the unifying thing. But you hear things about diversity, everything. You have a strict Mormon on one side, and you have an atheist on the other. But there's comics are considered the greatest of the Disney comics even today. But this just gives you an idea of what this kind of stories Mickey would do in the comics from those paintings. Because I couldn't really show comic panels for the whole show, but they did reprint all these Mickey comics about 10 years ago. They started reprinting them. They're all done now. They only did up till the 50s, I think, 1955, somewhere in there. And that's when it stopped being an adventure short and went to being a gag a day, like a traditional comic today. Mm-hmm. But and they're all out there now. They're not going for a lot of money, so if people want to find them, they're called the Floyd Gottfredson Disney Mickey Mouse Library, and they're horizontal books.
Man,
they weren't all in color. They did a couple. They did Sundays for a few years, but the Silly Symphonies one strip eventually replaced it. And we'll get into the supporting cast here. Some of them are from the comics, but they all had life in the comics, and that's why they're in the comic folder. Mickey's arch nemesis is the Phantom Blot. He debuted in 1937. Oh, these are the nephews. I get that. I'll do them first. I got my order out. That's okay. Morty and Ferdy Field Mouse, they started in the shorts, but they had a life in the comics. That's where they're primarily known from. You just skip on through there. They were inspired by the mice characters in a lot of the different cartoons at the time. The mother is Mickey's oldest sister, and her name is Felicity Field Mouse. And these predate Donald's nephews. And there was a children's book where they teamed up Donald with Mickey's nephews, and they go swimming. And they wanted to keep doing that, and they were like, well, Carl Barks and Jack Hanna were like, why? That's the book they were in with Donald. They're like, why don't you just put him with Donald having his own nephews? And the reason all these characters had nephews and nieces is because that was a way they could be parents without being parents. Because Popeye even got nephews eventually. But Morty and Ferdy, they appeared in Mickey's Christmas Carol. And there's that one's Ferdy, and Morty was Tiny Tim. So sorry, it's a small image there, but everybody knows Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Chief O'Hara, is that right?
Yeah, Chief O'Hara, I don't have much to say about him, but he was the chief of police. He debuted in 1939. He was an Irish policeman. He was in a lot of the Mickey comics. He got merchandised a lot. He was a serious regular, and he always bring in Mickey to help him solve crimes. That's all I had to say on him.
Ed, that's all I got.
Well, it's hard to find information on a lot of them. There's a lot of characters here, and I spent a lot of time on the ducks.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, and that's part of this series, man, is that you are getting these out there there's going to be people that are going to be researching, doing stuff.
Right, I think of these like evergreens.
And they're going to find these videos years into the future. And
that's how I looked at it.
This is such a service to our country, really. I mean, in a way, keeping this kind of
it's like I said at the beginning,
connection to our past alive that otherwise will be completely lost to history, man.
I didn't realize that's why when I was growing up with this stuff, that's just what I'd be doing with it.
There you go. See?
But a lot of it is these principles of these characters I apply into my own characters.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is the Phantom Blot. He debuted in 1939. He was inspired by the ink blot tests that all the psychiatrists were doing at the time. And he was originally just a jewel thief, but he became Mickey's arch nemesis. He kept returning in the comics. He eventually became focused on world domination. And when they unmask him, he looks like Walt as a dog. And there's a image of him coming up later here. Phantom Blot in all these comics, he ended up getting parents, children, nephews, siblings, and in one of the modern stories, he wants to be the Rainbow Blot. He's mad that he has to wear black, so he wants to absorb all the colors in the world, I guess. But very popular in Europe. To this day, he's still Mickey's arch nemesis in Europe, but he started as an American character.
Wow. And his name was the Blot?
The Phantom Blot.
Phantom Blot, yeah.
He did start out just being the Blot, but now he's known as the Phantom Blot. He appeared in one of the DuckTales episodes, but not as the Walt when they took the mask off. He was someone else. I think the professors are next. Or mad scientists, These professors are called Professor X, Professor Double X, and Professor Triple X. And they're based on that thing with the monkeys where they're covering their eyes, and ears, and mouth. And this is from the short Mickey did in the 90s, and it was called Runaway Brain. They weren't allowed to use the professors in that, but this character was based on them. The professor was called Frank and Ollie. Professor Frank and Ollie. He's based on. The name comes from the 9 old men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. They call him Frank and Ollie. And they put his brain in Frankenstein is what the story's about. But this is like what the Mickey running the company now. This is what I think of as this deranged Mickey. They put Mickey's brain in the Frankenstein monster.
Boy, well said, yeah.
But this short is a banned short today because the woke people don't like it. But Roy championed this because he remembered all these comic strips where Mickey had adventures with mad scientists and things, and that's why he did. The Professor, the X's, it's ECKS X. And they just had fun with it. They appeared on record albums and things too. And this character is called Eega Beeva. He's he's from the future. This character debuted in 1947. He's the man of tomorrow. He's what a human will look like, evolved 500 years in the future. And everything's screwed up in the future, and he comes back to understand 20th century man where things went wrong. Now, if that character doesn't fit today.
Amen.
But 1947 is when UFOs and the Roswell incident came along. So I don't know if that tied into it. This is his girlfriend. I don't know what her name was, but she was in some of the comics. And he had a dog as well. And Bill Walsh, who ended up producing a lot of Walt's stuff and writing it, the live action films, he became the writer on the strip in 1943, and he wrote them until 1964. And Roy Williams took over, who did the Mickey. He was on the Mickey Mouse Club, that heavy guy we've talked about before. And Floyd Norman did some of the Mickey comics in the 80s. He was the last person to do it.
Wow. Okay. In the Ducks now? Is that right?
Yeah, we're in the Ducks, and this is Carl Barks.
All right.
I just have to get to my Duck page. There we go. Carl Barks, he was born in 1901. A lot of these pictures are going to be here. These are paintings he did in the 70s of the Ducks, and they're based on the stories, so you get an idea what the flavor of his stories were. He grew up in rural Oregon on a farm. He was interested in cowboys. He went from job to job to survive. He was a farmer, a woodcutter. He was a mule driver, a logger. He was a cowboy as well, and he was a printer. And Donald Duck held a lot of these jobs in the animated cartoons and the comics. And this is from the comic that did with Pirates Gold. And that's the first comic. He worked on that. At the Walt Disney Studios, he started in 1935. He became a story man in 1937. That's when they teamed him up in the Duck unit, and that's where he created all these other characters with him originally. The reason he left the animation studio is when they built the new studio, the air conditioner bothered his sinuses, so he left animation. He went into comics.
Wow.
And that he did that to survive, but that became his career, was doing all these Duck comics. And that's most of the things in these upcoming folders. They're characters he created. And they're very popular in Europe to this day, because in post-war Europe, they really loved America. They wanted to bring in anything American, and that the Ducks got imported, and they really took to them, and they started making their own Duck stories with local artists each country. And some of these stories are now getting printed in the United States, but they're also editing things with the wokeness now. Mm-hmm. Carl Barks, he created over 500 Donald Duck stories, and Uncle Scrooge, all the ducks there. He had to flesh out the characters so they would work in comics, because you couldn't hear Donald's voice, so he had to become a more interesting, well-rounded character. The nephews were bratty kids in the cartoons, but he made them into resourceful, like they were the junior woodchucks. He invented that. And he'd send the ducks on adventures, and he had a stack of National Geographics, and that's how you'd research what these places they'd go to would look like, and different cultures and everything. He tried to get them authentic. And his stories were credited by Steven Spielberg and George Lucas for inspiring Indiana Jones. And when we get to the Beagle Boys folder, there's a panel that a boulder comes down and it smashes some stuff in a temple, and that was in Indiana Jones, but it came from a Carl Barks cartoon, comic strip. And when he hit his stride in the 50s, he said he could feel the creative juices while the whiskey bottles were hurling from his second wife. They got divorced, and his third wife, she was also an artist. She did landscapes, but she did the backgrounds and lettering on a lot of his comics. And they stayed married till she passed away. He never got credit when he was working on the comics, because that was the policy of the comic book company. And people started calling him, they recognized his artistic talent in the stories, and they started referring to him as the good duck artist. And they figured out who he was after he retired. And he became the first of the celebrities of the comics, Disney comics, and the animators as well. When he started doing these paintings, people Disney gave him permission to do them, but people would start selling unauthorized lithographs of them, and Disney got mad, and they took away his license to do them. But Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Gary Kurtz, who produced the Star Wars films, Gary Kurtz, they petitioned Disney to get him permission again, and Barks continued doing these paintings for the rest of his life. He wrote 2 final Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge stories in the 90s, one each. They officially made him a Disney legend. He lived to be 99 years old.
Wow.
And he was an atheist till the end of his life. That's the sad part of the story. But he was a very optimistic kind of person as well. So that wouldn't, if you think when you're dead and that's it, I wouldn't think you'd be very optimistic. But his stories are made popular to this day. One of his stories, 1949, they raised a sunken ship with ping pong balls, and that was done for the bicentennial. That painting, by the way, they raised a ship with ping pong balls to get the treasure. Somebody actually did that a couple decades ago, and they tried to patent it, but they couldn't because it was in this Carl Barks story. And the very first image ever displayed on an Apple Macintosh computer was a Carl Barks drawing of Uncle Scrooge. And if you didn't know this, here's another bit of trivia. Duckburg is located in the United States in the state called Calisota.
That's funny.
But he's really the person that really fleshed out these characters, and the duck characters became the most popular of all the Disney comic book characters. And it's because they were the ambassadors to all these different countries. They're very popular to this day in South America.
Depth gauge 90 feet.
Well, see, Scrooge had a money bin, and that's what he would do. He'd pile the money up, and he would swim in it. And when we get to Scrooge, I'll tell the whole story with him. But if you grew up with DuckTales, it's an adaptation of Carl Barks's work. Some people, Don Rosa, who succeeded him, he doesn't like DuckTales because they took liberties with the Carl Barks stories. But even Walt, when he did Snow White and all those things, and he did live action films, they were only adaptations of a book. And he just made them his own with the films. And that's what DuckTales is. These are Donald's nephews, and they are named after Huey Long and Thomas Dewey, the politicians. And there was a studio animator named Louis Schmidt. So that's how they got named, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. They debuted in 1938. And they were proposed by the guy doing the Mickey or the Donald Duck comic strip first. And his name was Al Taliaferro. I hope I got the name right. Carl Barks developed him for the short, and how they ended up with Donald is their mom's name is Dumb Bella Duck, and they put a firecracker under his chair, and while he's recuperating, they send him off to Donald, and that was the origin story. But you never hear about the mom again. They weren't allowed to put her in comics or anything until recently, and you never see the dad. No one knows what became of Mr. Duck. And one of the jokes, and that's the mom behind Donald and Daisy there. And they call her Della Duck today instead of Dumb Bella. And I know they did a reboot of DuckTales a few years ago, and she's one of the characters in it. But I don't like how it's drawn, and I know they put woke stuff in it. So I kind of reject the reboot of DuckTales. I liked the original when I was a kid. They appeared in 28 shorts, and they didn't get assigned who was which color until 1982. And
really?
And they would sometimes wear. Now this one was funny. The tax assessor's there, and Scrooge passed out. I put that in there for you.
Yeah, that's fun stuff right there.
The tax assessor looks like Satan. They all dressed in identical colors, or they would switch the colors around. They eventually settled on Huey's in red. Dewey is in blue because Dew is a blue color. Now there's sometimes they make a mistake, and there's a fourth one. They call him Fooey when they make a mistake. See, there's three of the nephews up on the hill with the Beagle Boy, and there's supposed to be one running away. So when they make a mistake, he's known as Fooey. And that's a joke there where there's Fooey. So Dewey is blue because he's called Dewey because dew is water. So they tied that with the blue. And Louie, the color of leaves, and that's green. So that's why they settled the colors. That's from DuckTales, the movie. Now, there were three nieces.
Forgot about, yeah.
April, May, and June. They debuted in 1952, and they're Daisy's nieces, and they would go on dates with Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And that's really all you can say about them without reading the comics, because they haven't put out all of the reprints. And they're in that Three Caballeros reboot thing, the series. I don't know how they are in the series, but I like how they tie it back into the original characters. I think Gus Goose is next.
All righty.
He debuted in 1939. He's Donald's cousin. He was only in the one short, but he took off in the comics. Carl Barks used him quite a bit. He created the character. He lives on the farm with Grandma Duck, and he's a farmhand, and he also has a cameo in Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Love that neck.
I think that short is one of the ones in the links. I just have a sampling of Donald shorts, whatever they had in their playlist. But I remember this one when I was a kid, and I think the joke was he wasn't really the cousin. He just said he was the cousin. He came in and he ate all of Donald's food. That's what the cartoon's about, and Donald never wants him to come back again.
Wow.
And he doesn't say any
with the sewing kit.
He doesn't. Well, no, I think he's eating spaghetti like a sewing.
Yeah,
like
but with sewing needles.
Yeah, he had those in his bag. I remember that. I haven't seen this short in years, but I remember that. That's where they all are together in the comic there. But that was a character he started in animation, but he went on and had a life in the comics. But he was created by Carl Barks, who did both. And the next character is Grandma Duck. And she was introduced in the comic strip in the newspaper in 1943. and she was based on the cartoonist's mother-in-law because she always was stuck in her old-fashioned ways. And she's always hardworking. She's a farmer. She's out of touch with technology and progress. And she was animated in 1960 on an episode of Walt's show. It's one of the things we're linking to. And her voice was June Foray, who was in a lot of the Looney Tunes. And Grandma Duck's name is Elvira. And back then, I guess you didn't think of Elvira as that woman in the Halloween mask or Halloween hair. Elvira was just an old-fashioned name. But she had her own comic book series, too. All of these characters, they spun off into their own starring roles. And there she is with Gus there. And one of these where they're with the whole family. Scrooge is with the money, and and she's there looking at the family album, and that kind of shows the priorities. No, that's a portrait by Carl Barks, but he did 2 versions of it. And you see that Gus in the portrait there in the front, and Gyro Gearloose.
Yeah.
And that's a cell from the episode of Walt's show where she appeared. That comic's been banned. That's the one where Br'er Fox is on Grandma Duck's farm. And they now in the reprints, it's not allowed to be included in the complete Carl Barks, and that's a recent development.
Erased him.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that was Br'er Fox till they brought it up. But that's why we're talking about this, because and we probably won't get that far. But there was an Uncle Remus comic strip for almost 30 years. The Disney studio did. It was from 1945, the year before the movie came out, and it went all the way to the 70s.
Wow, that's a cool drawing there.
And that one, I think, done
right.
I don't know which one are we in now. Which folder did we go in?
Oh, let's see. Maybe I messed up.
Well, it's okay because we're going to get to them all eventually. We got to get through all the ducks at least.
Let's see. Well, I went into the Gladstone
Gander. Yeah, he's next. I might have that in the wrong folder, but that's the whole.
Oh no, I messed up. Hold on. Let me back up. So we did Grandma Duck.
Gladstone Gander.
Now we need to. Okay, here we go. All right.
Gladstone Gander. He was created in 1948 in the comics. Now he's kind of like an opposite of what Uncle Scrooge became. And this is where he was in DuckTales. Gladstone was a loafer, a bum, and a chiseler because he refused to work, and he thought that life would just bring him everything with good luck. And he's considered the luckiest duck in the world, and everything falls into his lap. So he doesn't hold a job or anything. And there's one comic where he looks for wallets, and he needs money, so wallets appear in the snow. And Daisy needs some money to buy Christmas presents for some of the orphan kids. And he was created to be a competitor with Donald for Daisy. Like she would go on dates with either one. And Gladstone Gander, what Carl Barks said about him was he has no accomplishments, no ambition. He just expects everything to come along into his life, and that's kind of like a liberal today.
Yeah, over in the chat, Jointed Apollo calls Gladstone, says he was lame.
Yeah. Well, he appeared in several stories. Now, Gyro Gearloose, you'll love this. He debuted in 1942. The reason he was created was because of a government regulation that said that you had to pay more postage on a comic than a magazine. But if you had 2 stories in a comic, it was considered a magazine. So they created Gyro to go into the Duck comics. And yeah, that's a piece of trivia. And Gyro, he also starred in his own comic, but he also appeared with some of the other characters in their stories. But those last covers we showed, you can scroll back on the replay, people. But that shows how they would reuse the same cover over and over, and they would just redraw it and adapt things. But these are all of his inventions. And his little sidekick was a little light bulb, and it was named Helper. And his inventions rarely work, or they're all these elaborate Rube Goldberg inventions, but they have little to no practical use. And his animation debut was in the Sports Goofy special, and that was in the 80s. And his ancestors appeared in a lot of the comics. One of his ancestors worked with Scrooge in the past, and his name was Ratchet Gearloose. And sometimes he has a nephew. And that's the little light bulb sidekick. You remember him from DuckTales. All right, and the next one's going to be Uncle Scrooge. But with everyone that who grew up with DuckTales, I really think that's a good adaptation of these Duck comics with these characters. You had all those voice artists, very talented voice artists, doing those characters that worked all the way back in the 50s and 60s, some of them into the 40s. And that's why I consider that a continuation of all these characters. So Uncle Scrooge is Carl Barks' greatest creation. Well, that's his voice, Alan Young. You're at the end of the folder there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Let me get out of here.
Did they switch the order?
No, you're good.
What's it? You were in the right folder. That was just the last photo in the folder. It had it as the first one for some reason.
Okay. All right. So Scrooge McDuck. Yeah, I see what you're saying here. That's interesting. The numbers are.
Oh, just start at the end and go in reverse, I guess. I don't know how it. I'm not blaming you or anything. It's just one of those weird computer quirks.
No, we're good. We're good.
So Uncle Scrooge, I know you love this idea of the character too. This is his first debut, and that's big enough you can read it. How he hates the relatives.
Oh.
Well, you see how he first looked. Uncle Scrooge debuted in 1947. It was a story called Christmas on Bear Mountain, and the only reason he got created is Carl Barks needed someone to own this cabin that Donald would stay in, where he'd get into this antics with a bear. The bear was supposed to be the character that took off. And Scrooge owned the cabin, and this is a page I like, and this is a story called Lost in the South Seas or Journey to the South Seas, something like that. Scrooge sinks a ship, so he gets lost, so his relatives will leave him alone. So Donald and Gladstone go searching for him, and then Gladstone finds them, and Scrooge tells them off. And that last panel there, that's from the one with the square pigeons, square eggs with square chickens. In this Night on Bear Mountain or Christmas on Bear Mountain story, Scrooge dresses up in a bear skin to scare Donald, and Donald thinks that he's in on it. He knows that it's Scrooge, but Donald gets into these antics with a real bear, and Scrooge doesn't know that Donald knew that he was going to scare him, so he respects Donald. And Scrooge ended up, people kept demanding all these more stories of Scrooge because they liked this character. And Scrooge ended up becoming an adventure character. And they finally made him a sympathetic character by adding all these different aspects and qualities to them. And he got his own comic book series in 1952. So that's 5 years after he's created. And over the next 2 decades, he was the most fleshed out of all the characters. All these covers were done by Carl Barks, where they're all gags with the money. And ways they fleshed him out, he invented the town Duckburg. The money bin is located on Killmotor Hill. He invented things like Castle McDuck, the Hound of the Whiskervilles. Scrooge's money is 3 cubic acres of cash. They had to invent words on how rich he was, like
so great.
Multi-bajillion, impossibajillion. He liked to dive in his money like a porpoise, burrow through it like a gopher, toss it up and let it hit me on the head. That's what he would say. But that's right. That was put right into DuckTales. All the money means something to him. Like he knows what it looks like, and it has a memory. So each coin takes him back to his memories. He always said he was tougher than the toughies and smarter than the smarties, and he made his fortune fair and square. And Walt Disney soon realized how popular Uncle Scrooge was. He appears and that's the first time he was ever in an LP. He had a different voice for that. He appears in the opening for the Mickey Mouse Club in a cameo. And this was the first short. It was the last short Walt made, his first short with Uncle Scrooge. Scrooge McDuck in money. We've talked about it before. But what we didn't mention is they made a comic book of this, and you would go to the bank and start a bank account. You'd get a bank adaptation or comic book adaptation of that animated short where it taught you about money.
All right. That's really good. That's really good. And it's stunning. It's something, and I think that was in one of the early episodes that was in the description there, right?
Yeah, we have a link to it in one of the episodes. I didn't link to it in this, but
it's stunning when you see a Disney character, when you think of the context of today's Disney, teaching the fundamentals of capitalism and the benefits of it.
Disney today, they claim he's not a capitalist. Now, he got animated in Sports Goofy there after that. Now, this is the start of Alan Young voicing Scrooge in Mickey's Christmas Carol. This came out in 1972. It was a record album of Mickey's Christmas Carol, and they decided to adapt it into an animated film. And Alan Young heard about it. He voiced Scrooge in that record, and he wrote the record, and he wanted to voice Scrooge in the animated film, and he was Scrooge's voice till the end of his life. And he died fairly recently. He was the perfect voice. He was also Wilbur in Mr. Ed. From when they quote that was Alan Young. But nice. He in the LP it was a little different. The two people coming to get money from Scrooge, they were played by Honest John and Gideon from Pinocchio, the solicitors. The Ghost of Christmas Past was Merlin. The Witch from Snow White was the Ghost of Christmas Future. And the voice of Daisy was Janet Waldo, who was Judy Jetson. And that's from Mr. Ed. That's Alan Young when he was young. So
Wilbur here, the guy. That
was Alan Young. He was a famous actor at the time.
So that's the voice of
Uncle Scrooge.
Of Uncle Scrooge as well.
Ever since that LP. And I know they did the remake recently. I don't like that voice of Uncle Scrooge. I like Alan Young as Uncle Scrooge. He just has a lot of warmth and heart with that voice, the Scottish brogue accent, everything.
Mm-hmm. I like it. That's really cool.
And now we have all Scrooge's enemies in this folder.
All right. Is this okay? So in the Scrooge folder, we got his enemies.
Yeah, I think the next one's the Beagle Boys.
Yep.
I think it's in that folder. If it's not, I'll look.
No, we're good.
Okay, the Beagle Boys debuted in 1951. They were the reoccurring villains in a lot of the comics, just not for Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck. That was drawn by one of my friends. Came out when I was
right there.
He worked for. This was from DuckTales magazine, and he worked on DuckTales magazine.
Oh,
and
cool.
He's the one that taught me about wokeism. He was the college professor that got fired over the Pecos Bill cartoon. I didn't know that he worked on that till he showed me that a few years ago. And I had this magazine when I was a kid, and I just stuck those in there because those are the Beagle Boys from DuckTales. And that's the Indiana Jones inspiration there. Ma Beagle was created for DuckTales, the cartoon. She wasn't in the Carl Barks stories. They had Grandpa Beagle, but I think Ma Beagle's a more interesting character because of if you remember DuckTales, she mothered all these criminals and was always breaking them out of prison. And she was voiced by June Foray. The Beagle Boys had their own comic book, and it went from 1964 to 1980. And their animation debut was in the Sports Goofy special. And Ma Beagle was named after Ma Barker. Her husband would be in the comics, would have been Blackheart Beagle. The Beagles never had names in the comics. They just all looked alike, and they all, moved together in a march. Their numbers on their prison outfits, it always starts with a 176, and the last three digits are a variation of the 167. But they got invented originally because they would steal money, and they would that's how they would all march together in the Carl Barks stories. But they would get rehabilitated in prison. They'd pretend to be rehabilitated, but the government was just teaching them new ways to get into criminal behavior to break into Scrooge's money bin. And we're going backwards on all these. I don't know what happened to the folders. It's okay.
You okay? You want to do Flint Heart?
Yeah, because I don't have very much on each one. I just have a little tiny paragraph on each villain.
Okay.
Just Flint Heart Glom Gold.
I went to the end there. Okay, we're good.
All right. Well, Flint Heart, that's how he looked in DuckTales. I prefer how he looked in DuckTales to how he looked in the comics. He was created in 1956. He appeared in 3 Carl Barks stories. He's the second richest duck in the world. In the comics, he comes from the Valley of Limpopo in South Africa. And Don Rosa uses him more than Carl Barks did. But I kind of like the DuckTales version. Now, Eating the Hat comes from a character we're going to get to later. It's John Rocker Duck. He's in the folder ahead. In the comics, the 3 stories he got used in, it was always about Scrooge and Glomgold comparing who owned the most money in the world. That's how he looked in the comics. And that's from Carl Barks from there. I think that's from the first time he debuted. And that's from DuckTales. I guess I did a number of these. That's what's wrong with them. But that one, I just prefer the way he looks in DuckTales. And his voice in DuckTales was Otis the Drunk, Hal Smith. He did a lot of voices, Winnie the Pooh. That's how he looked in the comics there. And in the comics, in the last appearance, he tried to kill Scrooge. Like he got a gun and started firing at him. He was very ruthless. And Don Rosa is the one that uses him a lot. And he did a backstory where they met in South Africa to mine for diamonds or gold. I can't remember which. But I mean, just looking how they looked in DuckTales, I can hear the voices. You just remember what they sound. It's like the original animated shorts all had voices.
You want to go to Magical or
Magica de Spell? She was based on Sophia Loren and Morticia Adams, and she was created in 1961. She appeared in 9 different stories by Carl Barks. She is an Italian sorceress who wants Scrooge's #1 dime because he made all of his choices. That's Sophia Loren, to show how he based the look on her. She wants the #1 dime because it was the first coin Scrooge ever earned, and it has all of the financial decisions he ever made is in that dime.
Wow.
And that's why she wants it. She wants to melt it down to grant her the Midas touch. She lives in Mount Vesuvius. Her raven in the comic is called Ratface, and in DuckTales, they made it into her brother, and it was named Poe after the Edgar Allan Poe thing. And in the comics, her best friend is Madam Mim from The Sword and the Stone. I think John D. Rocker Duck is next.
You got it.
He debuted in 1961. Carl Barks only used him once, but in Europe, he's a very popular character. He's the primary villain for Scrooge in Europe, and he gets these yellow shoes. Don Rosa gave him an origin where he inherited his wealth while Scrooge earned his wealth, and that's where their conflict is. And the story of Carl Barks did, Rocker Duck is an oil tycoon, and he challenges Scrooge to a boat race to see who has the best diesel fuel. And I think, is Witch Hazel next?
Glitter and Goldie.
Oh, Glitter and Goldie. Okay, that's okay. Glitter and Goldie, she's Scrooge's girlfriend. She's based on Klondike Kate, was a real person. If you look up what her biography was, that you can see why it was based on that. She debuted in a story called Back to the Klondike, where Scrooge has this flashback where he was in love with this pool hall girl, and they come back. She's staying in the cabin on his old claim. Don Rosa has done like 3 or 4 stories with her. I know they brought her back in the remake of the DuckTales stuff. But that was Scrooge's old girlfriend, and he made her an old broad that hangs out with a bear, and gun-toting old broad. And they kind of make up at the end of that story. He gives her the claim to the land, and that's where she lives. But that comes right out of the history with the Alaskan Gold Rush and everything. But she's an important character in the Don Rosa stories because he focuses a lot on her in how Scrooge became Scrooge.
Now I've got Witch Hazel.
Witch Hazel, I don't have a lot to say about her. She debuted in 1952 in a cartoon called Trick or Treat. And in this one, Donald's a jerk. He steals all of the kids' candy. She's voiced by June Foray, who also voiced a character for Looney Tunes called Witch Hazel as well. And she was in 3 Carl Barks stories, but she was in a lot of European stories. And she varies between being a good character and a bad character in the stories in Europe.
Now we've got Don Rosa.
Oh, Don Rosa. Okay, open him up. And Don Rosa, he's the guy that took over for Carl Barks. Oh, he's considered his successor. He started in the mid 80s. That's him there. He retired. He did these for about 22, 25 years. He retired because he had a retina separate in his eye, and Disney kind of they don't take care of their artists very well. But I wanted to get him in there because he did this book here that's called The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. It's a very famous story. It started out as 12 volumes, and they put it into this one volume, the 12 issues. 2 of the issues in this volume are banned now by Walt Disney.
Oh,
and
wow.
What he did was he took every time Carl Barks put in a story, Scrooge said he did this in Africa when he was this age, or this year he was there. He made this into a biography, and he combined all the characters together and interact and everything. And he's like the Tolkien of the duck stories. And he puts a lot of history and everything in these. And now he's really angry that they've erased. These are the reprints, what they look like. There's I think there's 10 of them altogether. And they did 2 reprints of the biography. And it's an award-winning biography, but Walt Disney won't use it now because they don't like that. And this is a comparison of all these different books. Now I put this in here because the one on the right, that is how big we draw comic book art. And then on the left, that's how big they're printed. And I know average people probably don't know that, but all of those are different different editions of the Life and Times of Scrooge. I have all of those on the right there. I don't have the issue version. Well, the one 11 by 17.
So you draw them big, and then they're shrunk down.
You shrink them down because of the resolution. But that's why I included that, because most people probably don't know that.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. Absolutely. Wow.
Well, I didn't either until I started doing comics, and a lot of this stuff with the comics I know about because I learned how to do cartoons watching cartoons. I learned how to do comics by reading comics, and I didn't start reading comics till my late 20s when I realized the animation's out because of how everything was going woke.
Let's see. Ludwig von Drake?
Ludwig von Drake, Professor Ludwig von Drake. He debuted in 1961 on Walt's TV show, and when it went to be The Wonderful World of Color. He's the only character Walt created for television, and these are all the photos with Walt with Von Drake. And he was they used to if you bought a color television, you got a little toy of Von Drake with the television.
Oh, how cool!
Because these were they went to color to sell color TVs. Is why the networks went to color. Walt always claimed that he was Donald's older brother, but in the comics, he's married to Uncle Scrooge's sister Matilda. That's Paul Frees. That was the voice of Von Drake. He was also Burgermeister Burger, the voice of the Haunted Mansion, and all that stuff. That's Ward Kimball animating him there. How I define him is he's an expert who's a quack. He's an egghead with a bird brain. And that's my own thing I came up with.
I like it. It works.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the only character 7 of the 9 old men all animated on. And he appeared in 18 episodes of Walt's TV show. In the comics, he's an oddball inventor who invents things like the silent alarm clock or the diet shampoo for fatheads. And he appeared in comics. He appeared on LPs. He was on. He had his own comic book series. They didn't put him on the Donald Duck family tree because that little beetle, that's his sidekick Herman. Herman the Boodle Beetle. Ludwig von Drake couldn't be on the Duck family tree because his name is based on Werner von Braun, who worked with Walt on the Man in Space series. He'd been a Nazi. He came over to America to work in the NASA space program. So the woke claim that Von Drake is a Nazi scientist that came over here with Project Paperclip. And that's why he's erased from the Duck family tree. That's one of his record albums where he had a theme song. He was in, he did several of these. So that one I think was also an animated thing. These are some of the examples of the comics, just to show he's a very popular character in the 60s and the 70s. And I don't know how popular he is in Europe. He started on the TV show. That one got released theatrically, but it was also an episode of Walt's show. They would release, like they do short subjects. That was released as a short subject as well. It's like a half-hour thing. We linked to it in one of the previous shows. That's one of the Von Drake toys. You bought that one. It wasn't a giveaway. I actually have that. I got it at a toy fair for $4, but I don't have it in a box, and I don't have Herman the Boodle Beetle with it. You can see him in the pocket there. See, you never see Von Drake merchandised.
No, that's really cool, man.
I used to, when he'd come on the Disney Channel, I'd always love those because he was a funny character.
And Moby Duck.
Moby Duck, he debuted in 1967 in the comics. He was the last of the Ducks to get animated on the Walt show in 1968. He was Donald's cousin, and he's a sea captain. And he was also voiced by Paul Frees. His first mate on some of these covers his name is Dimwitty Duck, And his comic book series was a very popular comic book series. And the short that the episode we linked to, it's called Pacifically Peaking, and it's an educational short, or film, and it's hosted by Moby Duck. But a lot of these characters, they were in a lot more issues than I'm giving you examples of, but I'm just trying to give you examples how popular and well known these were in American culture. And that's Dimwitty there in the background. And sometimes Donald would work as his first mate in the comics. And the Disney studio would encourage the people doing the comics to create new characters so they could do animated films with them. But they didn't really do very many altogether. There was just the Scrooge, Ludwig von Drake, and Moby Duck that really crossed over, and Grandma Duck. That's a clip. That's a still from the short, and that's where he was animated. He was animated by Ward Kimball, and it's probably banned because he's in there with Islander ducks.
Okay. All righty. Let's see who is next.
Feathery
Duck. Okay.
Yeah, this character debuted in 1964, and he's Donald's beatnik hippie cousin. And there's one of the stills there. Just there's one there where
awesome look.
One of them he talks about progressivism. Now the last one there. That was just go to that last one. And he tells they need to have freedom and progressiveness, and Donald gets mad that they're ruining his books, and he swears at him.
You're suppressing them.
I mean, that 1960, he debuted 1964, but I don't know which year that comic was. And they end up wearing that tasseled hat. He never got animated in the Golden Age or Silver Age, but he's a very popular character in Europe to this day.
Good. It's hysterical. All righty. That's Feathery Duck. Next up is, let's see, Duck Family.
Yeah, the Duck Family tree. Yeah, that's the last one in that folder, and you can decide if we can finish off. But this is the family tree, and it was Carl Barks had a Duck Family tree. All these ducks were related, and then this one's drawn. This is drawn by the cast of characters by Carl Barks, and you see most of what characters we talked about are there. I included the ducks. That zombie character on the far right. That's why some of these comics are banned now. Okay. It was in the story. It was a zombie that was sent to get Scrooge's money because Scrooge swindled an African witch doctor. Okay. Or the witch doctor thought he was swindled. That's the tree as Carl Barks figured it out. I don't think he drew that though. But Carl Barks is considered the definitive tree, and that's Carl Barks's tree there. And you can zoom in if you want, but if you go over here, see how they cover up the dad for Huey, Dewey, and Louie because they're not allowed to talk about where his dad is. And the reason Matilda Duck is on the far end of the sheet is because she's married to Ludwig von Drake. That's the only way they can. That's the only way he can be Donald's uncle. But all these other characters, they're all minor characters in Carl Barks's mythology. And because he goes all the way into the McDuck ancestors in the tree and everything.
Try to get that back on here.
I think in Europe they even sell that as posters, but those ducks were very popular to this day. They're still very popular in Europe, and it was all because of post-war World War II. They got imported as part of Americanism, and all these ancestor ducks you see down at the base of the tree, there's stories where all these characters either are mentioned or appear in the stories. And Carl Barks did 500 stories. And I don't know how many Don Rosa did, but he did 10 volumes worth of the books. And Don Rosa really connected all this stuff into being a Tolkien-like mythology. And that's Scrooge with his parents and his uncle and everything. He had two uncles, and one was I think one was Angus McDuck and Pothole McDuck. And Pothole came to America, and Scrooge worked on his riverboat. And that's where he first encountered the Beagle Boys in the history.
Let's see here. All right, we got one more here, I believe. Right, or where am I at now? So we did the.
I think that's the rest of the ducks, and I think the next one's called the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Like
okay. Silly Symphony.
whatever whatever of these you want to get into. Silly Symphonies. I got to pull my notes up here. We might have to put that on a different show and just do the other ones.
Yeah, that way it's a clean
clean break
here. Yeah, let's go ahead and hold it right
Let me
there.
say one more thing about the ducks. If they reprint this, this is done. These were written by one of my friends. It's this is out of print now, but if they reprint this, I'll mention it. Although this history we talk about, he still respects this history. It was Aaron Sparrow. Now I did say his name right. He wrote the stories. They're doing Darkwing Duck comics again, but they didn't ask him to come back. But he's sane and normal like we are, if you know what I mean. So I mean, look at all this. This was like a continuation of the Darkwing Duck series, but he brought in a lot of these Carl Barks characters into this series.
Oh, cool!
And
that's cool.
If they ever reprint this, it's worth picking up if you like Darkwing Duck, because Darkwing Duck had a lot of science fiction-y kind of comic book elements in it. But that's better than anything they're making today.
Wow!
Because respecting the past.
Yeah. Enlightening as always. I love knowing that there's all this backstory on the Donald Duck, Scrooge, McDuck, and all that good
Donald
stuff.
Duck was probably the most important of the shorts characters created because of all this history in it, and it all went into European culture.
That's really cool, man. All right, so looking ahead to next week when we gather here Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern for part 10 of 12. What are we doing then?
Live action films and television.
Live action film and television. Okay. And if you've missed any of these fascinating historic episodes, we've been doing this every Saturday morning since the end of December, and it'll end up being a 12-part series. So if you've missed anything, there's a playlist here. Look for it here on the YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications so that you're alerted anytime we do live stuff. We not only Saturday mornings here with Ed and Saving Disney History, but every Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, I do a Friday live stream. In fact, coming up 5 times August, and Toby McAvoy are my guests coming up on Friday, March 8th. Anything, Ed, you want to leave us with before we part ways for this edition?
If anyone's interested in the Carl Barks things, they printed this a couple of years ago, and this collects a lot of the stories in it. This was for the 75th anniversary of Uncle Scrooge. It was 2 years ago, so it's probably still available. But it's an oversized volume there. You can see how thick it is. But it has a nice overview of all the stories in the years. If you don't want to get these are the ones that they're printing for year by year, and they're starting to edit the stories out of them now. So they're not. It says on it it's the complete Carl Barks, but it's not now.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was going to say. If there are people in your life who don't understand the transformation that Disney has undergone, share this playlist with them so that they can be stunned and learn what is being preserved here by Ed, because my goodness.
With a lot of these animated shorts where they're smoking and different things like that, it's all considered. We can't have that now because it's woke. And animators like cigars because they could use them as a prop with the acting. And and that's how I always see it when I use a cigar on a character. And now it's all taboo. I don't know how many of these shorts are still available to see other than people posting them online, because Bob Iger has said that he's mad that Roy released all these shorts on DVD.
Okay, well, Bob can be upset then. Where can people find your animation and some of your drawings? Is there a place where people can go to see your stuff?
I'll be putting stuff on Twitter, I guess, when I get going here. I have 3 websites, but the economy the way it is, I can't host them all every month.
I understand. There it is, at real_Ed_McCray. Look for him over on Twitter X. Ed, thanks as always, brother. I hope you have a great weekend. And same to all of y'all. Thank you for participating in the chat and for joining us here. Everyone, do have a great weekend, and we'll catch you back here next week.